Alright, so let's continue our discussion here on. Actually, this part of the module will simply discuss what we call the translation. We will have a better understanding on how the affine transform is working. We will create a demo program that will simply translate, rotate, and scale the following rectangles, which is very, very easy. The affine transform here is composed of zero or more linear transformation, rotation, scaling, or what we call the shearing, then, and translation. Now, several linear transformations can be combined into a single matrix. A rotation is a transformation that moves a rigid body around a fixed point. A scaling is a transformation that enlarges or diminishes the objects. The scale factor is the same in all directions. A translation is a transformation that moves every point a constant distance in a specified direction. A shear, on the other hand, is a transformation that moves an object perpendicular to a given axis, with greater value on one side of the axis than the other. The affine transformation or the transform class is in Java 2D that can simply perform the following. So we'll create here four different programs. And so I want you to, number one, create here a translation X class in your IntelliJ. So gawin natin to. Public and public class translation X. Then we extend JFrame. Okay. Very simple. Tapos the main method here, public static void main method string args. So pakita ko muna kung ano nga ba yung mga packages na we need to import. Of course, the color. Yan, para dun sa color gray lang yan eh. Event queue, 'di ba? Alam natin 'yan. The graphics. Tapos si graphics 2D. Tapos si javax.swing. We have here JFrame. We have here javax.swing, JPanel. Yan, so ganun lang siya. Napakadali lang ng mga kailangan nating i-import dito. Actually, the code is very simple. It's very, very short lang siya. So, gawin natin si event queue ulit. Event queue, invoke later, new, runnable, yan, public void run, translation X, set the visibility into true. Next is the constructor init UI. Okay, so private void init UI. We will create here the JPanel. Gawin natin ditong trans na lang siguro yan para mas madaling masulat. We set the title as translation. Tapos we set the size as 300 by 200. Tapos si location relative to null. Tapos si default close operation into JFrame that exit and close. Ganyan siya. So gawin natin ngayon si class trans. Yan. Class trans extends JPanel. We don't need to implement some action listener because at first place hindi naman siya, we don't need to make this moving. There are no particular threads as well. So ganyan lang siya kadali. So on this part, gawin na rin natin si override annotation. Tapos si public void paint component. Graphics G. Yan. Super paint component G. Tapos si do drawing. So this is very easy to understand. I'm telling you. Yan. So meron tayo ditong private void do drawing. Tapos si graphics G. Yan. Tapos cast ulit natin si graphics 2D G2D is equal to graphics 2D G.create. This should be capital letter D. Yan. So Yung sa G2D natin, we will set the paint as gray, 150 by 150 by 150. So, gray color po yan, di ba? Tapos, we will simply set or fill the rectangle. G2D fill rec. Yan, 20, 20, 80, 50. Ganyan lang siya. Tapos, si translate, okay, dito lang ngayon. Si translate naman, it will simply translate the rectangle into its corresponding value, 150 by 50. And we will now set the, or fill another rectangle here, which has a value of 20, 20, 80, and 50. Tapos, let us go ahead and dispose that. So, ganyan siya. Very, very easy program. And let's see how this thing works. And let me show you how it looks like. Meron na ba tayong size dito? Yeah. Tingnan natin. Oops, merong error. So, anong number yung error natin? Translation sa number 12 daw. So, try natin yung i-fix. 150 by 150. Ito. Set paint. G2D.set paint. Do drawing. Illegal start of the expression. Ito. Yung comma. Alright. Try natin. So, ganyan lang siya, di ba? We have two rectangles here. Tapos, translate mo lang yung difference between the two of them. So, as simple as that. A very, very simple program. Now, let's try to take a look yung sa may next sample natin here, which is the rotation. How we use the rotate method naman. So, let's create here a rotate class. And, so, gawin natin si rotate class. And, public class rotation x extends JFrame once again. So, public static void main string. Oops, args. Ayan. Tapos dito, siguro, para mas madaling maintindihan, we just like to import the javax.swing tapos si java.out. Ganyan lang siya. Para mas madali nating ma-gets. Tapos event queue dot invoke later, new runnable, tapos si instantiation natin ng object, new rotation x. Nandito yan. Tapos x.set visible. Oops, nakalimutan ko lagyan ng x dito. Ayan. True. Ganyan siya. Now, the constructor here, rotation x. Init UI. Ayan. Private void init UI. Let's set the title as rotation this time. Ayan. Tapos add tayo dito ng panel. New rots, for example. Let's set the size as, again, 300 by 200. Let's set the location relative to null. The default close operation as exit unclose. Diba? Pansin nyo, bitis kong mag-encode nito kasi nga, pag lagi mong ginagawa, talagang masasanay ka. Diba? So, let's create here another class. So, class rots extends jpanel. There you go. Tapos dito, of course, si override pala. Ayan. Override annotation public void paint component, in which we are doing since graphics G and super the paint component G, tapos do drawing G. Of course, we have here the do drawing private void do drawing method, which is graphics G, graphics 2D G2D is equal to the casting of 2D to G.create. So, gawa tayo ng paint. So, ilan ba tong image na to? Dalawa lang din. So, yung isa naka-rotate ng konti. Diba? So, the color here is the same, which is graded. Ayan. Let's fill rec with a position of 20, 21st. Tapos yung 80, 50 as their size. Tapos si translate, which is 180, negative 50. Translate natin yan. Now, for the rotation, rotate natin yung next rectangle as mat.pi, which is in circle, divide by 4. So, in circle yan. So, i-fill rec na ulit natin. Translate is actually the position or the gap between them. Ito. So, bakit ako may error dito? Translate. Tama naman. 180. Wala akong comma. Ayan. Fill rec here is the position now is 80-80. Tapos 80-50 ang size niyan. Ganyan siya. Tapos, of course, let's display that. And let's run the program. Ito lang yung talagang ginamit natin yan. Yung rotate eh. Ayan. So, nag-rotate. Kung i-divide by 3 ko to, let's see what will happen. Kung divide by 3, tignan natin yung difference ng rotation nila. Is there a difference? Yes po. There is a difference between their rotation. Kapag 2, so imagine a circle, then you divide that into 2. Diba? In this case kasi 4 lang. Pero kapag 5, ayun. Diba? So 4 is ideal in this program. So that's how you use the rotate method nga naman. So, alam na natin yan, diba? Sabi ko sa inyo, madali lang. Let's try to scale. We have 3 different rectangles here, but then we will try to rescale them and individually. So, gawa tayo dito ng program in which we scale the rectangles. And scaling X, public class, scaling X, and public static void main string, args, then of course the extends JFrame, and of course we have to import the java.out, something like that. Alright, so in the event queue dot invoke later, we have the new runnable scaling X is equal to new scaling X, again instantiation of the new object, set visible into true. Then let's go ahead here and create a constructor which will simply call the initUI method that will simply set the properties of your JFrame. So private void initUI. Let's add here or instantiate here a new scale surface, for example. Then let's set the title as scaling program or whatever scaling related titles. Let's set the size as 330 by 160. Tapos si location relative to, which is null, and the default close operation as jframe.exit close. Okay na. So, wala ka ng problema dyan. Gawin na rin natin si class dito in which will automatically extend the jframe. Scale surface extends jpanel. Yan. Tapos we have here the do drawing and the paint component. So first is the override annotation for public void paint component. Yan. Graphics G. Tapos super that paint component G. Do drawing. Pare-pareho lang ginagawa natin, di ba? Yan. So private void do drawing. Graphics G. Tapos graphics 2D, G2D is equal to graphics 2D casting to G.create. Simple as that. So let's set the color of the first. which is 150 by 150 by 150. Tapos, we fill the rectangle. Yan, as 20 by 20 by, let's say, around 80 by 50. Yung size na ng rectangle natin. Now, we will be using what we call the Affine Transform. Yan. I'll name that as the X1. New Affine Transform. So, I instantiated this object. Was actually based from this one. Dito sa .chom Affine Transform na yan. So, gagamitin natin yan today. The purpose of that one is for us to freely use the translate method and as well as the scale method. So, yung scale natin is 0.5, 0.5. Yung x and y scale values natin. So, kung ita-transform natin yan, kung i-run natin yung program, tignan natin kung may error. I think, yeah, meron pang error dito sa set color. Nakalimutan ko mag-new color dito. Ayan. Oops, number 17. At override. Bakit ako may error dito? First time kong nagka-error dito, ah. Tama naman spelling ng override ko. Public void. Ito. Play component. Alright. Ayan. So, yung sinet mo dito na size ni rectangle, it's actually not the exact size kasi nga in-scale mo siya eh. So, kung tatanggalin natin to, ayun siya, di ba? So, it looks the same, pero in reality, the scale of them is actually different. Yan. So, gumana, di ba? Working na siya. Now, let's try to, again, transform or let's set the transform of the next rectangle as the x1. Mali. G2D, the graphics 2D. We will set the transform as the x1. Tapos, we will fill another rectangle here with the position 0, 0 and 80, 50. This time, tingnan natin. Hiran natin yan. Ayun siya. Nagkaroon ng panibagong rectangle that really set the scale of this one. Kasi kanina wala pa, di ba? So, parang pareho lang. Pero ito, this time meron ka ng scale dito. Nagpakita. So, kung titingnan natin, kung gagawin natin ulit si Affine Transform natin, which is TX2, for example. So, we have here Affine Transform na object. Tapos, TX2, the translate method, which is 170 by around 20. Tapos, the scale is this time tx2 dot like 1.5% as the x value and the y value of like that. Ayan. Tapos, kagaya rin ginawa natin, this time iset natin yung transform niya into tx2. So, whatever tx2 properties that you set here in the tree, halimbawa ito. So, the translate is 170 and 20. Tapos, the scale is 1.5 at 1.5. Kapag gagamit ka na ngayon or magsaset ka na ngayon ng fill rec, ayan, 0, 0, 80, and 50. You have to expect na medyo malaki yung magiging, mo dito, yung magiging rectangle mo this time. Kasi in-scale mo siya into 1.5, diba? So, kapag gusto mo pang mag-scale ng panibagong rectangle here, you simply use the Affine Transform object. Tapos, you set the properties of the Affine Transform object. Then, you fill the rectangle. And voila. It will automatically fill a rectangle for you, which is in scale method. Although, the size is 80 by 50, yan. Pero, since meron kang scale dito na 1.5, automatic yung 80 by 50 mo na scale yan into something like that. Okay? So, ganun siya. Ganun nag-work ang scaling natin. So, on this part of the program here, we have what we call the shearing. Ang shearing naman, medyo challenged ng konti ito kasi, again, shearing is a transformation that moves an object perpendicular to a given axis. So with greater value on one side of the axis than the other. So tingnan natin. Let's try to recreate this one. We have three different colors here. Meron tayong red, blue, green, and we have three objects. Rectangle pero naka-shear ng konti. Naka-ganyan ng konti yan, di ba? So tingnan natin. Ayan, so ginawa ko na para mas mabilis tayo. Itong shearing X na to. So, alam natin gawin to, di ba? This is actually the main method and the init UI. So, I hope on your end, alam niyo na rin gawin to. So, shortcut natin para mas madali. Alright, so gawin natin tong si panel natin na class shear extends jpanel. Okay. Tapos, well, I know you already know how to do this. So, I can just simply copy and paste the paint component here. Then the do drawing will be somehow private to Bovoy do drawing with the graphics G. Yan. Tapos si graphics 2D G2D is equal to graphics 2D graphics 2D G.create. Alright, so first of all, let's use the Affine Transform, the X1, as new Affine Transform. Then, let me set the property of that one as 50 by 90 as its translate method. Tapos, for the G2D set transform, I'd like to use the TX1 as Affine Transform. Tapos, the color, yan, set paint is actually color.green. So, ito yun. I'm trying to recreate this. The green, yung medyo madali pa. So, kung napansin nyo, hindi tayo nag-shear dito, but then as is lang siya na ganyan, color.green lang siya. Then we can just simply draw the rectangle, 0 by 0 by 160 by 50 as well. So kung i-run mo yan, again, draw rect po ha, hindi fill rect ang ginamit natin. So ganyan po siya. So i-dispose na rin natin. Yan. Para sure mamaya. Next, so we call the Affine Transform this time TX2. New Affine Transform. Tapos for the TX2, this time we have the translate of 5090, which is the same. But the shear or the way on how you actually shear them is 0, 1. 0 for the X, 1 for the value. So 0, pareho lang yung X niya. Yung Y value mo, ginanyan mo ng konti. Okay? Tapos, TX2, we will set the graphics 2D transform as TX2. And the color, which is, of course, set paint color dot blue. Yan. Tapos, maggawa tayo dito ng rectangle G2D dot draw new rectangle 0, 0 80, 50. Oops. 80, 50. Pansin nyo, same position sila nung kanina. 'Di ba? Pero, mag-iiba yan kasi nga naka-shear and we added here a translate. Ayan. 'Di ba? So, nandito siya. Yung 0, 0 position niya is based from the translate here, which is 50, 90. Yung gap mo na nilagay. 50, tapos 90 position. So, automatic, everything will start here. So, parang ito yung magiging start ng coordinate system mo dahil sa translate method na yan. Okay. So, next is the Affine Transform TX3. Yan. TX3 is equal to new Affine Transform. Pero this time, let's use the translate method. Tapos, gawin natin siyang 130 by 10. Gusto natin dito naman. Somewhere dito. So, same lang siya ng properties. Magkaiba lang ng kulay. Diba? So, TX3 translate is 130. Ayan, nagawa ko na pala to. Yung shear natin is 0 and 1. Try to play around later on kung anong itsura pagka binabago nyo yung mga numbers na yan. Sa transform TX3. Tapos G2D.setPaint color.red. Oops. Tapos si drawrect natin. which is in 0. Based from the translate, it's 130 and 10. Tapos 80 and 50. So run. There you go. So that's actually how shearing works in Java programming. It's very easy to understand. Again, try to change the values here of the shear method. Try to understand kung ano nga ba ang ginagawa nito. Pero the 0 here is the x and y values lang. Alright? Alright, so thank you for listening. Meron pa tayong last part ng ating tutorial, which is the hit testing and the moving object.